All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty huge, I think, and that's how your mind, like literally your mind, shapes your wealth.
Yeah,
We've got some really interesting material that dives deep into like the psychology of money,
absolutely.
And the whole goal today is to really kind of try to get down to how your thoughts and feelings, right, really impact your financial well-being.
Yeah,
And it goes, way beyond just the numbers. Like we're really trying to look at the inner workings, like the internal landscape of your personal finances.
exactly. I mean, a lot of the times we're kind of focused on those external economic forces,
Right.
but all of the sources that we've been looking at really highlight that our internal beliefs and mental habits, those are really powerful drivers. It really impacts our financial outcomes.
Okay. So let's get into it, right? Let's kind of unpack this a little bit.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that I think is important to understand is this concept of money scripts.
Yeah.
And the material kind of lays it out as, these foundational understandings of money that like we develop, right, from our early experiences, our family and our culture. It's almost like a financial DNA in a way.
Precisely. And a lot of the times these money scripts, they really operate below the surface, right? They're not always conscious.
Right.
So for example, if you consistently, throughout your childhood heard money is hard to come by, you might develop a really core belief in scarcity.
Right.
And what's interesting is that the research suggests that this scarcity mindset, it can lead to some unexpected behaviors. Like sometimes it can even lead to impulsive spending, like a fear of missing out before those resources vanish.
That's so interesting. And, I think it's a really important thing for everyone listening to think about, right? So if you're operating from this belief, this scarcity belief, the sources kind of suggest it can manifest in sort of opposite ways. Right. It can be hoarding, like the classic, oh my gosh, money's scarce, I need to hoard,
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, it could be this rash purchases, this got to get it now before it's gone.
Right.
So it's almost like the same root cause,
Yeah.
but leading to these kind of polar opposite behaviors.
Yeah. And it's fascinating how these ingrained scripts really act as a lens through which we interpret all this financial information.
Right.
And we end up making decisions a lot of times without even really realizing it. It's just automatic.
The material also goes into cognitive biases,
Yeah.
right? These mental shortcuts that our
Yeah.
brains just, that they evolved to use. But sometimes they lead us astray, especially when it comes to finances.
Yeah.
And two of the big ones, right, that I think are important to highlight are loss aversion and overconfidence.
Loss aversion is a big one. The data really consistently shows that the negative feeling of losing money, that's much stronger than the positive feeling that we get from gaining the same amount. And so, you can imagine how that might lead someone to avoid a potentially really beneficial investment just to sidestep any possibility of a loss, even if that possibility is really small.
And then overconfidence, that's the other big one, right?
Yeah.
Like thinking you are just a financial whiz.
Yeah, right. More so than you might actually be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the sources indicate that this, having this inflated self-belief, this can result in taking on way too much risk in your investments.
Right.
It really prompts the question of, for anyone listening, how accurately do you really assess your own financial skills?
And that's hard. That's a tough question.
It is a tough question, and I think it ties into how often do we really critically examine, the basis of our financial decisions. And, these biases, a lot of the times they're unconscious. They're just patterns that we fall into.
Right.
So it's not always easy to spot them.
Okay. So another concept that I think is really fascinating that the material talks about is mental accounting.
Oh, yeah.
And this is basically how, we mentally categorize our money,
Uh-huh.
right? Like we think of it as, oh, this is my fun money versus this is my, savings. But really, at the end of the day, it's all the same money,
It is.
right? Well, we treat it differently. I know I'm guilty of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Like depending on where it came from, like
Yeah.
if it's a bonus at work or,
Right.
whatever.
It's weird.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that, while that can be really helpful in some ways for budgeting, it can also lead to some illogical choices.
Right.
Like you might hesitate to use money from one category for something urgent that's come up in another category.
Yeah.
Even if it's the most financially sound decision overall, but because it's coming from a different mental bucket, it just feels wrong.
Yeah. I think we have these artificial barriers.
Yeah, exactly. Artificial barriers between our own funds.
Yeah. It's so bizarre,
Yeah.
but it's so true. And we can't just talk about the like mental side, right? Like the really mental side. We also have to talk about the emotional side of money.
Yeah.
And I think this sources really emphasize this powerful link between our feelings about money, right? Whether it's
Mm-hmm.
security, anxiety, pride, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and how that drives our actions,
Yeah.
right? Financially.
Indeed, indeed. And just, think about how anxiety might prevent you from investing.
Right.
And potentially, that could be hindering your ability to build wealth over time.
Right.
Or on the other hand, think about how pride could lead to overspending
Right.
to project a certain image.
Absolutely.
So, we really have to recognize that these emotions are super potent motivators in our financial lives.
Absolutely. Okay. So, I mean, this is all pretty heavy stuff, but what does it all mean, right? What does it all mean for like the average person listening to this?
Well, the good news is that, from what the material says, is that our mindset isn't set in stone.
Right. We can take steps,
Yeah.
to actually change the way we think about money
Yeah.
and create a healthier relationship with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first step is self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
Like really taking the time to reflect on your past experiences with money and the beliefs that have formed as a result.
Yeah.
And, another really important step is just learning about these cognitive biases.
Yeah.
Because when you can spot them in your own decision making, that's a huge help.
Right. And the material also, stresses the value of using practical tools,
Yeah.
right? Like budgeting, like
Yeah.
actually setting some financial goals,
Mm.
having that roadmap.
Absolutely. Having that plan in place is so important.
Right. And, it even suggests, which I thought was interesting, like maybe even exploring mindfulness or therapy to really address some of the deeper emotional baggage that we all carry around.
Yeah.
That might be, creating obstacles for us financially.
That's right. Sometimes those deeper issues, they can really hold us back without us even realizing it. So yeah, definitely worth considering.
So, okay. So I think, what we've really seen in this deep dive is that, the relationship between our minds and our wealth, it's pretty profound.
Yeah.
It's complex. It's so much more than just, knowing the numbers or, having a good budget. It's really about understanding these psychological influences.
Yeah, and I think recognizing those influences is a really vital step towards managing your finances more intentionally
Right.
and more effectively.
So I want to leave you with this, all right? Think about one specific message about money that you really internalize early in life,
Yeah.
right? Like, what did your parents teach you?
Hmm.
Or what did you observe growing up? And how might that message, even now, be subtly guiding your current choices?
Yeah,
It's worth thinking about.
absolutely. It's a really worthwhile area to explore.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.
See you then.